What did your teacher do that you didn't realize until you were older was fucked up?
He had a jar of punishments for whenever you broke one of the rules. Both the punishments and the rules could be created by the students, and if you broke the rules you had to draw a punishment. Rules included everything from insulting another student, to speaking out of turn, to forgetting a pencil. The punishments all centered on public humiliation. And because it was a class of high schoolers given almost full reign, every class devolved into nothing but trying to bait other students into being punished or convincing the teacher they needed to be. Punishments included forcing students to get on hands and knees while pushing a penny across the room with their nose and saying, "Beep beep I'm a Jeep," performing the highly sexual "Call on Me" dance, requiring students to scoot up and down every aisle of desks on their butt like a dog while barking the whole time, or making one kid spend an entire class at the front of the room, facing the wall, wearing a literal dunce cap. I forgot a pencil one day and had to stand at the front of the room while every student in the class balled up a piece of paper and threw it at me. One kid threw an entire notebook. I then had to crawl around on the floor and clean up all the trash. The teacher ended up getting reported at the end of the year after I and several other students complained about it unofficially to a different teacher, and while he wasn't fired, the jar of punishments was gone the next year.
In 8th grade we had a unit on the Holocaust. Some students were chosen to be the Jews, and had to wear yellow stars, hide during off periods, and get treated pretty shitty by other students. This was all supposed to help kids understand how horrible it all was. Didn't realize until years later how fucked up it was once I really thought about it. In the 3rd grade we used to say the Pledge of Allegiance, USA, every morning before class. Then one day the teacher said that the black students in the class didn't have to get up and say the pledge because they weren't really citizens. As a white kid I was jealous of not having to do it every morning, but as an adult I think it abhorrent. Mrs. Doobie, if you're reading this, then I'm surprised you're alive, you racist sack of shit.
When I was in 9th grade my Spanish teacher had us pick Spanish names. I chose Jesus, but she refused to let me have that name, saying I looked like Antonio Banderas. So, my name was Antonio. Whenever we would take quizzes or tests she'd walk the aisles, always stopping at me, resting her hip on my shoulder. Then on a Monday, she had a black eye. Before class she and I were having a discussion about me turning in late homework. A fellow student comes in, goes to the teacher's desk and says, "Ms. Blank. What happened to your eye?" The teacher looks at the girl, looks at me, and replies, "Antonio and I got into a quarrel over the weekend and he hit me." What the fuck?
3rd grade teacher placed all of the boys in class on timeout and had tea time with all the girls for 30 minutes once a week. His reasoning, which he told us, was that boys were mean bullies and girls are nice and should be rewarded. This is one of a dozen or so things that the parents all documented over the course of the year, his first year teaching. Ultimately he was fired.
I've posted this before, but still. When I was in elementary school, our PE teacher had a policy that he didn't share with us. Apparently, it was his rule that girls couldn't wear skirts when we were in the gym. If you were wearing a skirt, he would hoist it up to make sure we were wearing shorts underneath. Most girls were not wearing shorts underneath, and he knew it. He did it to the girls, myself included, from kindergarten all the way up until 4th grade.
In middle school, I had a math teacher talk about statistics. Somewhere in there, he said that statistically, 3 out of the 7 girls in the class will be strippers at some point in their lifetime. He even had a joke about how all the boys were probably hoping it would be Tina, the hottest girl in the class, not a real name. Everybody laughed. We were actually confused when he was fired later. Looking back, all I can say is wow, how did I miss how wrong that was? This was a Catholic, pay tuition school too.
My 5th grade teacher never let me go to the bathroom when it was apparent I had a UTI. I peed my pants every time and she never said or did anything about it.
I had a 6th grade teacher who would choose the best behaved student of the day, always a girl, to give him a shoulder and neck rub. I was just always really jealous that I wasn't the best behaved. Super cringy, Mr. B.
Grade 4 teacher spent days making our class memorize the lyrics to Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, then had us sing it to her when she was stressed. Often multiple times a day. She was replaced a few weeks before the end of the school year. Years later we learned she had a mental breakdown, which was the reason she was replaced. She never taught again. Almost 30 years later and I still know that song by heart. Almost 30 years? Jesus, life moves pretty fast.
When I was in elementary, my teacher wanted to show us a video about fire safety, but accidentally opened the wrong file. The whole grade of students cluelessly stared at one man and 3 girls in a hotel room for a few seconds before the teacher closed it.
After the Columbine incident, schools started to have all sorts of procedures set up in case of an active shooter incident. At my high school, we were taught if an announcement was made over the PA of a certain fake faculty member was to report to the main office. That was our cue to shelter in place and take shelter in the classrooms. Once a year we had the drill, and every time it lasted about 5 minutes. We had a teacher though that was just a little bit off. I had him for a class during 8th period of my junior year, and as time went on, the whole class kind of figured he just was a very serious, quirky kind man. On one particular day, about 10 minutes into class, he tells us all to get under our workstations because he heard the coded announcement. We all hid till the end of the period in our positions until the end of class bell rang. Our classroom was at the end of the school and it was generally a quiet outside, so we never questioned whether this was a drill or not. This happened 2 more times during the year. We eventually just figured that he wanted to test us with his own drills. Looking back on it and by talking to some of my former classmates, turns out he was faking active shooter drills to get the class to shut the fuck up at the end of long days.
My English teacher seemed like an ordinary guy to me in high school, only now that I'm an adult I realize he was drunk in most lessons. I heard he was fired after a few years of my graduation.
The music teacher at my elementary school did all kinds of creepy stuff. The one that stands out for me was that every Easter he would have us do the bunny hop, except it mostly consisted of us standing still in a bunny hop pose while he came around to inspect our tails. We knew something wasn't right about him, but as kids we didn't really understand the full extent of the creepiness. It was just something to joke about. A bunch of parents finally complained to the school about him, and shortly afterward, he moved to a different school district, supposedly because he would be able to make more money from private lessons there. Yep, he offered private in-home music lessons. A friend of mine took lessons from him briefly, and apparently he insisted on absolute privacy while the lessons were going on. The door had to be closed and her parents weren't allowed to open it.
My 4th grade teacher would stand in the bathroom door and watch us pee, because she said boys couldn't be trusted not to pee all over the walls and stuff. My 10th grade science teacher, a 60-year-old man who was never married and didn't have many friends, would hang out with students after school and go to student parties. He would even buy us alcohol, tobacco and marijuana. He was fired for trying to date a 15-year-old student.
Consider subscribing.